And welcome. We are live at this ELAAD web talk. This is the 10th one we are doing, and this is the second one we do in English. First one was with Auke Hoekstra from the TU Eindhoven, and that one was about how electric cars emit even less CO2 than previously thought. You can still watch that on YouTube. And this one will be with Frank Geerts of ElaadNL, an expert in smart charging, and he will be presenting the English version edition of the Smart Charging Guide, which was released in 2020. And he'll talk about what is smart charging, how does it work, why is it necessary, and how are we going to arrange it. So my name is Erik van Kaathoven. I work as a communications manager at ElaadNL. ELAAD is the Knowledge and Innovation Center for smart and sustainable charging of electric vehicles. And ELAAD is an initiative of the joint Dutch grid operators. So before we dive into the subject, please let me tell you a little bit about the ELAAD web talks. We do this every 2 weeks. The idea is that they are relatively short and that we let an expert do a presentation about a survey or a study that he did or she did, and in about 15 minutes, and then about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So please feel free to put your questions in the question box. This is part of this web tool. There's a question box here, and Frank will try to answer as many questions as possible. So also good to mention, this web talk is being recorded and will be available on YouTube later this afternoon. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Frank for his presentation on the Smart Charging Guide. Frank.
Thank you, Eric. Well, welcome to this 10th presentation or web talk. And probably it's a coincidence, but the book that we are presenting today was also because of the 10th anniversary of ELAAD. So maybe the first slide. Why did we write this book? It was the anniversary of the 10th year of ELAAD, and we have learned a lot in the past 10 years, done a lot of experiments, and we thought it would be a nice gift to combine all those insights into a book, and that is what is being published. We first did it in Dutch, and now it's also available in English. And with this book, we are ending the first era of electric mobility, but actually it's the beginning of the next steps for electric mobility. So we hope this book helps people to get a head start in smart charging, so that we together can make the future for smart charging. So please, the next slide. We have proposed a central question in the book, which we try to answer. So we help to educate you on this topic, but also try to answer the question, when we have millions of EVs on the road, how can we charge these vehicles with renewable energy and without overloading the power network, so that it remains reliable and affordable? To answer that central question, we have several sub-questions which you see below, which we answer in the book. But before we go to smart charging in itself, I'd like to tell you in the next slide about the unique time that we are living in, because we are part of the third power revolution. About a century ago, electricity was introduced in our houses, and we saw electricity incremental growing and introducing new stuff for us humans to make life more easier. And so the household appliances, but now at this time we are, I would say, at a changing the electricity system after a century. It is not only electric mobility, it is also the change to pure renewable energy, but also the heating and cooling of our houses when the earth is getting warmer and more cooler in the winters. We are also at that change. So electric mobility is part of a bigger picture. Please, the next slide. So we thought in the book we need to do a thought experiment. It's good to see where we stand now, but let's start with the end in mind. So what is the challenge of 100% electric mobility. Do we have enough energy to charge all those cars? Is there enough renewable energy? Can we generate the energy at the time that we need it? And can we transport it to the right locations? Well, usually I ask these questions to the public, but given it's a webinar, I'll do you the favor and give you the answers right away on the next slide. If you look at the Netherlands, you see the orange line, and that represents the energy being produced in the Netherlands, 120 terawatt hours, and the simultaneously power that we can generate when all installations produce electricity at the same time, which is 30 gigawatt. If you take that as a reference, and you would look at the passenger cars in the Netherlands being 8.5 million, and how much they drive a year, you would see that the total energy consumption would equal about 24 terawatt hours, which is 1/6 of the annual usage in the Netherlands right now. Well, if you take into account that the introduction of the electric cars will take over a decade and a bit more, this is an increase of electricity usage of about 2% a year, which is quite equal to the rise of electricity usage in the past decades. So that's not the real challenge. We can do that. We have been able to do that in the past. But if you look at the power, there you see that the power that passenger cars can create as load on the grid is 3 times higher than the total load that we have as production capacity in the Netherlands being installed now. So the challenge of electric mobility and charging passenger cars is not so much the energy, but much more the power. And the numbers that we present here are quite equal to other countries in Europe and most developed countries in the world. Please, the next slide. So when we look at smart charging, we have the opportunity to start riding the waves of renewable power. As I told, electric mobility is part of a bigger development. And with more renewable energy entering the electricity system, which will be more in waves, we have the opportunity to use the waves of renewable energy to charge our cars. On the other hand, and that's the next slide, we have the challenge of getting the electricity to the right place. In the past, the only way when we would have more power in the system is to reinforce the power grid. We simply did not have another solution. But the electric car is unique with both the power load, but also with the storage capacity it inherits. And with that, there is a better solution possible than reinforcing the grid. And that's on the next slide, and that is what this presentation is about. That is smart charging. So is smart charging complex? I would say, no, it's not complex. It's like Johan Cruyff said, once you see it, you understand it. So to help you understand smart charging, we introduced a 4-layer model to structure this question. And that's on the next slide. We have 4 layers, focusing on the left side to technology and machine-to-machine communication, and on the right side, more on the organization of smart charging. So on the next slide, I will introduce the first layer, technology. And luckily, smart charging is in its basic very simple. It's just the control signal between a car and a charge station. Please hit on the next slide. So what we do with smart charging is that we influence the time, the power, and also possible the direction of charging the car, or maybe even discharging the car. For that, next slide, we need intelligence. The intelligence to determine at what time with what power a car is being charged. And that intelligence can be located on different places. It can be in the car, it can be in the charge station, or it can be in related systems, the power grid or a home energy management system. And these systems can be at a local level and work standalone, but they can also be hosted in the cloud and be controlled from there. And then the next step, next slide, is to make that intelligence work, you need data. You need data about the driver's needs, about the possibilities of the car, what is the state of charge of the battery, but also what is the charge point capable doing of, and what's the situation in the energy system. So based with the data and some intelligence, you can control the time, power, and direction of a charge session. Next slide. So for a user, this will look a bit like this when he starts smart charging. The blue line represents a standard power charging. But with smart charging, you can choose to charge faster at some times. For example, where there's a lot of wind or solar. You can delay the charging, charge with a lower capacity. For example, to give some priority to your house. You could pause it to wait for optimal times of low electricity prices. And in the near future, we expect that you can also use your car as a generator, for example, to help your heating your house. So this is what an individual, a driver, notices from smart charging. And in the end, smart charging should always help the customer in charging his car, because you buy a car to drive from A to B. But when you aggregate charge sessions, and that's on the next slide, this is where it becomes really interesting from a power system perspective. Because when grouping charging sessions, you can help manage the electricity system. What I said, the individual driver can charge his car when the sun is shining, but you can also help to sort of spread the load on the grid, on the system, with a group without interfering with the individual needs. So when we look at this control signal that is needed, on the next slide, we see there are different routes on how this charging signal can be sent. It can be sent via the charger, where the charger controls what power at what time is available, but also the car. You can enter what you would like your charge pattern to look like. And finally, when you're in a building or in a home, you could have a local energy management systems which communicates either with the charge station or maybe with the car and make the optimum usage for your complete electricity system that you are looking at. Well, very important with open standards and protocols is on the next slide. As we saw, the power that cars can generate is that high if you look at the national scale or an international scale, that security of those signals is essential. And we've done a lot of groundwork here at Elaad, and we're still very much focusing on this topic, as it's so important, as you know, the power that those cars can generate. So on the next slide, you see a result of the national working group on smart charging that has started last year in the Netherlands. And what we did is the layer of technology of hardware and the layer of machine-to-machine communication, all the requirements and all the standards that we know at this point in time, we have combined these in a smart charging requirements document to make sure that every charge station that is being installed now, but also every car that is being sold now, is capable of doing this smart charging. But in the end, it's not about technique. It's about how you use smart charging. And that's the next layer on the next slide. You see on top the icon for the organization. And there are a lot of parties involved with smart charging. It's of course the driver at first, but you also have the companies that are providing the smart charging services, and those are commercial businesses. You have the grid operators of the energy system, and you have the ambitions of the government for the energy transition. And all these parties have different motives with smart charging and also different interests. And the challenge is to combine these and make win-win-win-win situations with smart charging. And that is possible. The good news is that all these stakeholders are very much in favor and advocate of smart charging solutions. And when you look at the last layer, the legal layer, well, you have the organization's ambitions and interests and motives, and they need to be transformed into contracts or into legislation. And in BASIC, you have 3 different kind of contracts that are of interest when you charge your car. It's first a charge contract. And a charge contract is something that a consumer engages with a commercial business. What is the price for charging? What are the guarantees for smart charging? So that you know upfront what it will do to you. And part of your charge contract is an electricity contract, because in the end, electricity is flowing into your car. And that relates to the grid contract. So I told about the energy system. The energy system is about supply and about transport. So for both, you need contracts. And of course, businesses can sign contracts between them to make a good proposition. And in the end, you have the legal framework about consumer safety, about the electricity internal market, which set the boundaries on the contracts and the organization of smart charging. Next slide, please. And when you put those 4 layers together, you get this visual. On the bottom, you have the technology. And as I mentioned, you have the hardware, both of the car and the charger. You have the data and intelligence. You have the location where you charge. And you have the grouping or the individual control of charging. You have the machine-machine communication. Which direction, on which route do you send the control signal? You have the organization and you have the legal on top of it. So this helps you when you have discussions about smart charging to see what are we discussing. Are we discussing hardware? Are we discussing organization, etc.? On the next slide. So that brings me to the conclusion. What to do next? Well, I would say that smart charging technology is good enough at this point in time. Electric vehicles are in general capable of smart charging, and the charging infrastructure is as well. We did some groundwork at data access protocols and cybersecurity. Is it good enough? Yes. Can it be better? Yes. But compare it to the mobile phone. If you look at the mobile phone of the early 2000s, it was rather different than the one we have now. And probably technology will evolve in next generations. But the generation we have now is good enough to start smart charging. When we look at the power system, you see that a lot of work is in progress. Legislation is preparing for more flexible prices of electricity supply, more flexible tariffs for power grid access, but also security of supply safeguards, as you know that the power needs to be controlled to stop a blackout. I think the real challenge and the next step that we should set is the commercial scale-up of smart charging services. So not more focus on the technology and hardware, but on the services side. And then the drivers should come into to view. And we should make sure that electric driving is more convenient, better, and everybody that has driven electric prefers that above a combustion engine. I think we should strive for a smart charging service that also exceeds customer expectations of drivers. That was the rounding up of my presentation. Eric.
Thank you, Frank. Very interesting presentation. Short headlines of all about smart charging. Thank you for that. We have some questions. Let me start by asking you, what are the biggest challenges we face in making smart charging on a mass scale the norm?
Yeah, as I concluded in the last slide, I think we already have covered a lot of ground. So technology is definitely good enough. And I think that with automotive more and more investing in electric mobility and also promoting it, it's quite sure that those cars will come. But what we do miss at this moment is commercial offerings of smart charging of charging services. And I think we need improvement in that to really scale up. It must be a business case for the commercial part of this industry, and making offerings to the customers.
Yeah, thank you. And another one is we're talking mainly, I guess, about passenger cars so far. But what about trucks and buses? Are there also possibilities for smart charging there?
Yeah, I think definitely so. But smart charging for buses and trucks is a bit different than for passenger cars. I think the main difference is that the utilization and the number of hours that a vehicle is used, especially for buses and trucks, is much higher in comparison to passenger cars. So that means that the standing time of trucks and buses is lesser than passenger cars. But that doesn't mean that there is not an opportunity, because still there is a standing time which normally exceeds the required charging time. And I think for buses, they can be very well predicted with their routes. So you can very much plan when you need to charge your bus. For trucks, I think that is relatively new. And then we need to do some more investigation on what is optimal in helping delivery of the trucks, and use the standing times to charge a car or the vehicle.
So there are also possibilities, but it's different there.
Yeah, I think that the dimensions will be different for that.
Okay, thank you. A question from Jeroen Jansen. He says, well, obviously the benefits for grid operators of smart charging are clear. But what are the benefits for car manufacturers and consumers? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of focus in the last years about the power grid. But I think when you look at the rise of renewable energy, the interest for electricity suppliers and producers in smart charging will increase very heavily. And that creates opportunities also for automotive and any other business that wants to supply charging services. When I talk to drivers, they usually start with an electric car or solar panels. And once they have one of them, they want the other. So when you have solar panels, you want an electric car. And when you have an electric car, you want solar panels. And directly people say, I want to charge my car with my own solar panels. So the wish about drivers to become green is very high. And people are interested in it. And they realize that the standing time of their car gives them an opportunity to become part of the energy system. You have such a large battery that would be, people feel it like a waste of not using that. And I think that automotive has a real new opportunity. Beforehand, they just sold mobility and the hardware of it. In this new market, they can either self-become electricity or a smart charging service provider, or they can make contracts. For example, if you buy a car, you could say, well, I do a private lease, which includes a charging service for a fixed fee a month. And then the automotive company would sign a contract with an electricity supplier in Europe, so that you have a good offer everywhere in Europe for charging your car.
So there are a lot of opportunities there also. So Patrick Rademakers asked a question, how realistic is it for V2G? You also mentioned V2G as the next step, I guess, to do this on a large scale in, let's say, the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think that the technical readiness level of V2G is a few steps lower than smart charging, than charging your car only. But I do think there is a huge opportunity for V2G. Well, maybe not in the coming 5 years, but definitely after that. As I mentioned, with solar production, you want to harvest that in your car. But most people don't drive hundreds of kilometers a day. So to be able to consume that electricity just by driving, you don't drive enough. So then V2G comes in and can help you to use your harvested sun energy to electrify your house. So for the coming 5 years, I think on the technology side, some work needs to be done, but that's going very rapidly. And well, once the technology is there, I'm quite sure that the business cases will arise from there.
Okay, thank you. Well, there are many pilots that have been done with smart charging in the Netherlands on public charging stations so far. And also they are most of the time smart charging ready. Are we still lagging behind with home charging stations? What is your opinion on that? With regard to smart charging, of course.
Yeah. I think that we have spent indeed quite a lot of attention on public charging infrastructure. But at the meantime, we were talking about public infrastructure, charging infrastructure. We see that a lot of home chargers have been installed. So the number of home chargers might be even bigger than the number of public chargers. And a lot of those chargers are they have not been dimensioned or technically required to be smart charging ready, but a lot of them do have quite a lot of possibilities in that respect. So I think that in the next step that we are just at the beginning of, we should indeed take into account heavily the basically all locations where it's being charged. So not only public charging infrastructure, but also home chargers, and not in the last place, work chargers. We're now working from home, but hopefully COVID will end in a couple of months, and we will be able to travel to work. And work is an ideal location to also charge your car. So yes. I think that for smart development of smart charging services, we should include all locations, and we have also from the home perspective a quite good starting point.
Thank you. And in addition to this, also in the smart charging guide, there is a page on solar cars. Sonos and Lightyear are working hard on putting them on the market.
Yeah.
What will this change with regard to the smart charging possibilities?
Yeah. As I just told, people, once they have solar panels, they want to drive electric. How nice is it if you have an electric car that directly has your solar panels? So I think the idea is really fantastic. I'm not a hardware expert on solar panels, but I do think that will solar cars be a game changer will mostly depend on the number of kilowatt hours that a solar panel on a car can generate. Will that be just part of the mobility need? Will it be able to completely fulfill the mobility need of that car, or will it even exceed it? And especially when it starts to exceed the needs of the driving, then it would be extremely interesting to make V2G part of that car, and then you have your own solar panels on your car helping your house. At this point in time, I'm not sure which way it will go. And I would say it's too early to call on this development and its future possibilities.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question from Jules Sommers, and I saw someone else putting this kind of the same question also. Are there possibilities also next to AC charging for DC charging with regard to smart charging?
I think so. In the end, where the inverter of DC to AC takes place, there are different options. So at current, it's mostly done in the car, and there are people stating, well, you have that's the thing, that the car is DC and the grid is AC, so that will not change. The grid will also remains AC and the car will remain AC. So somewhere you need to convert it. It does make sense to do it in the car, but you see, especially if it's with fast charging, that you do it in the charge station. I would say that for smart charging, I would like to look at it from a services perspective. And you want to manage the energy flow. And where the conversion takes place, I would say, well, the best technology, and you can look at it from different angles, will probably be, one of them will be the winner, I guess. What you see now is that AC is far upper hand on, well, normal charging, you would say, and DC is more favorite for fast charging. But if there is somebody who can provide real good solutions for normal charging with DC, for example, also integrated with V2G, well, let's see which technology takes the overhand.
Okay, both are possible. So you are also the chairman of the Smart Charging Working Group in the NL, the National Agenda for Charging Infrastructure. So how important is it that we have such a working group, and what are the biggest challenges it faces?
Yeah, well, I think it's very important that we have this working group. And also this working group is part of the bigger energy transition picture. So that's also good to realize. It's directly related to the ambitions of Paris. I think that maybe in the Netherlands we have become a bit self-satisfied how good we have been in the recent past. We are really #1 in the world and front runner in number of chargers, also with cars, with smart charging. I think we compete with the best and maybe also basically show what is possible. But other countries are catching up quite fast as well in numbers, but also there the industry is evolving. So if we want to keep the advantage that we have now, we don't need we should not lean anymore on successes in the past, but look forward. And I think this is what the working group can really help us do, to make the business opportunity for the Netherlands and the businesses in the Netherlands, to make that through. We need to really work together and make the next steps. And in the working group, we have done the groundwork. And I make reference to the requirements document. We are finalizing a document on all the lessons learned, not only from ELAAD, what is in this book, but also from all other initiatives on smart charging. And with that, we hope to set the basis to really accelerate in setting the next step. And I really hope that that the working group on the national level, where we work together with all involved stakeholders, because there are a lot, that we can make the win-win-win-win, which I mentioned in my presentation.
Thank you. Klaas Toelen asks, so there you mentioned that technology-wise, smart charging is almost ready already, but data-driven solutions are somewhat of a hot topic these days in research. How often is it already deployed in real world? And do you think they can improve smart charging further?
Yeah, so I said
data.
Yeah, so technology is good enough. And I think that also applies to the data. There are so many solutions around data. I think that commercial businesses have all ingredients to combine data, to combine the intelligence on top of it, and make those control signals work with all the protocols that we have. And yet it's true that at this moment in time, the necessity of smart charging is not there, because we simply are taking up the reserve of the energy system and filling the glass up. And the glass is not yet full and overloading, but we're getting closer to that point. And once the water boils over the glass, then we have no way back, and we need to prevent the streaming over the water. And that's why I'm focusing and emphasizes we should now start introducing those smart charging services and be ready for real scale up. Because the automotive, if you read the news articles, sometimes every day automotive publishes tens of billions of dollars of investment in new cars and new models. So in the coming 5 years, I have no doubt anymore that the cars will hit the road. And if we don't prepare for that now with charging and smart charging services, we will be very sorry in the near future. So we have to take that step from, well, what I said, this book is a sort of end of the beginning. And we have been done 10 years of experiments and understanding and developing technology. Well, we should draw a line there and now focus to the future and say, well, now we need to do the next step, because we will not talk about 10,000s of new drivers anymore. We will be talking about hundreds of thousands and even millions in Europe. So we need to accelerate.
Thank you. So, well, the next step, Carlo Mol is putting a question about this also. He says, which new smart charging features are still missing and need to be developed in the next 2 to 3 years? Very specific, but you can answer it in a more broad sense if you want to. What are the next things we really need to do?
So I think that in the next step, so we should commercialize smart charging services, not any longer mere just for the people that are part of the pilot, but to every driver. Basically, well, I'm talking about the Netherlands, but we really should do this at the European level, because you drive your car around Europe when we are allowed to, and there you need to have the same seamless smart charging service as we have, for example, with bank cards. You can get your money out of a bank machine, an ATM, in all of the world. That should be as interoperable for for services as well, charging services. Maybe we should even leave out the word smart. Charging services need to be smart, of course, that we don't have to emphasize that anymore.
It's a no-brainer.
And I think by just helping in spreading the load and finding the optimum moment to charge, I think, and making basic services for that to the customer, that should be the first step. We should start commercializing technology.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna be on about the end of the questions part. We can put in one more question, I guess. Let's see. Well, this question is from Paul Broos. What if different stakeholders in smart charging, like the DSO, TSO, and energy supplier, want different things, give different signals in smart charging terms? How do we cope with that?
Yeah, an interesting question if you look at the electricity system as a total. And well, the European Commission has done quite some groundwork on the internal market for electricity and the rules basically on what is a free market and what needs the system, the grid to accommodate, are described quite in lengthily in there. But the basics of the electricity market in Europe is that commercial businesses should have all opportunities to freely engage in electricity supply and getting cars charged. But at the same time, the Commission has introduced in this new package the possibility to do demand response services for the customer. And that's from the total perspective of the energy system, with the waves of energy coming into the system. I think that especially with the car, you have the flexibility to choose when you want to charge your car, and that can help the total cost of the system to become lower. And at some moments in time, there might be conflicts, but what we have learned also in the past is that 95% of the time, the interests of the production is very much in line with the capabilities of the power system. So I think that we should not focus too much on the exceptions, but get the mainstream right, and then see what happens in the exception situations. And I'm quite sure we can find good solutions for that.
Well, that's an optimistic end to this question and answer part. Thank you, Frank, for your presentation again and for your answers to the questions. We had some more questions which we will try to answer. Frank will try to answer via email. You can still put in questions via email, send them to info@elaad.nl. And for those who want to know all about the Smart Charging Guide, I have one here. You can also find a PDF of the Smart Charging Guide on the Elaad website. So feel free to read it and to ask questions about that. In 2 weeks' time, we will have our next web talk, same place, same time, but this time in Dutch, I'm afraid, for the English-speaking people here. On February the 11th, Nazir Refa and Jan van Rookhuizen will hold a presentation about the Elaad Outlook, not yet published, on the electrification of construction. How fast will mobile construction equipment become electric and how can we charge it? And on the 25th of February, Roland Verda from NKL and Bram van IJsden from ElaadNL will hold a presentation about smart charging plazas and their use as energy buffers. So this web talk will be available on YouTube soon. And thanks again all for joining us, for watching us, for putting your questions in, and hope to see you in 2 weeks, same place, same time. Bye.